Hello everyone, welcome back. Today in the workshop we have the American elm. Now this is a native species to America, of course. They do grow here in South Carolina, as well as another species that I'm currently looking for to collect for Yamadori, which is called the wing-barked elm. This one is pretty close to being ready to be transferred into a bonsai pot for its final potting, so it can be technically a bonsai instead of a pre-bonsai, which is where it's at this point, or where it has been up to this point. Cool thing about this species and a couple other of these native species here in the United States is that they hold their leaves all winter long. And the speculation on that is the reason that happens is these leaves are there to protect the growing buds that are at the stem intersection. So I guess with these leaves on here, it protects those new buds from frost and snow damaging those buds. So the first step in this operation today is going to be to remove all these leaves. Now I've waited till pretty late in the season to do this. There's no more threats of frost anymore. We're into May already, so the buds on some of my other trees are starting to swell. This one has not started to swell per se just yet, but I think we're to the point now where we can go ahead and get these leaves removed so we can see the branch structure that we have. So then we can in turn trim the branch structure back and get it into some semblance of where it needs to be for the designing of the tree, and then possibly even repot this tree into a bonsai pot today and talk about pot selection, because we haven't really done much of that either. So the first step is just to go through here, and the way you can tell this is we're going to be ready to do this work is if you just barely touch these leaves, they'll come off. Well, that one's making a liar out of me. But the majority of them, when you just touch them, they pop off. And that means that they're getting ready to come off anyway. Some of them will even fall off while you're doing this operation. So we're going to go through, get all that done on this tree, get all these leaves off of the tree. I mean, you can literally just touch them and they come off. So that's when you know it's the right time to do that. Some of them are kind of stubborn. And in the fall, up to this point, I would come up to this tree and you could tug on these leaves, and I mean you could pull pretty hard and they wouldn't budge. So that's kind of the timing on this tree to let you know that, hey, I'm ready to go ahead and be worked on without a problem. So we're just going to, like I said, go through here, get all this done, and then we'll see you once we have this accomplished and we can see the branch structure so we can start doing our pruning for this year. Okay, now that we've got all the leaves removed off the tree, and one of the reasons I love this particular species of trees, you can see the bark on this thing is just unreal. It peels off in these big, thick layers, and obviously that's a sign that the tree is growing and that the tree is healthy, but it also gives that interest and makes it look really, really old. I'm trying to maintain this bark as much as I can. Eventually it's going to come completely off and there's nothing I can do about that. And it looks like the bark that's behind this bark here that's currently on the tree is rather smooth in comparison. So I think what happens with this tree is it grows and then has a slowdown stage, and then it grows and then it has a slowdown stage, and in between those slowdown stages and those growth stages the bark layers get real thick. And then once it grows again, it splits that bark open and it peels it away. I'm gonna try, like I said, try to keep as much of that on the tree as possible, because I think it's a really neat, interesting, trait of this tree that really makes it look cool. Up here in the new growth section, you can see it's really, really smooth. But down here in the older section, you can really tell it's got this crazy, craggy, flaky peeling away from the trunk bark. So let's get started on trimming the branches now. And of course we want a fairly decent sized canopy on this tree, but we don't want the canopy to be so large that it makes the trunk of the tree look small. We want to emphasize the trunk size on the with the canopy. And of course, first thing we always do is anything growing straight up, I don't care where it is on the tree, that gets removed immediately. So this has got to go. I'm just going to kind of go through here and do that first, and then we're going to look at what we are left with. But you always want to remove anything that's growing straight up, because it'll never be anything for the design of the tree that'll be a positive thing. And again, anything growing straight down as well. Now these branch tips are growing straight up, and that's fine. We're going to wire those into position, or we're going to prune back to a smaller bud and a smaller branch, which gives us that ramification that starts thick at the trunk and gets thinner and smaller as it gets out towards the end of the tree. I did leave some of these on here intentionally and let them grow a little bit long intentionally to bring some more strength into the branch, because I've noticed with this elm species, sometimes if you don't let that happen, a lot of the smaller twiggy tracery branching that's on the tree will end up dying, and it'll die all the way back to the trunk of the tree. So that's something I've learned about this particular species with working with it, is that sometimes you got to let it get a little bit out of hand and let it grow and get some energy into the branches to keep those branches viable. So that looks to me like that's pretty much everything that we've got growing straight up that's on the trunk. There's one right here that needs to come off. There's a little bud below it that I want to try to keep. So, okay, I think that's pretty good. Now let's start looking at this branch here, is where we're going to start. We always start with the lowest branch and work our way up from there. So, on this branch in particular, it's a little bit out of the bounds of where we want it to be as far as a design standpoint is concerned. I'm kind of concerned with this branch back here. I was wanting to try to keep this if I could, but it doesn't look like it's going to be viable for me, because all the growth is right out here at the very end, and it's not real strong. For some reason, this is one of the branches I was talking about. It gets real weak, and I didn't cut anything off of it last year in hopes that it would put out some growth like this one here, where it's really long and extended. So I'm going to cut it back and hope that it will stay alive and stay viable. But if it's not the end of the world, because I still have this branch here that will be more than enough to fill in where this one left off. I've got a lot of viable, because this one did have this extension growth. I had some back budding that popped on the back side of this, and that's going to allow me to focus on this part of the branch and keeping this part of the branch viable. Now I'm going to cut all of this off in favor of this smaller growth that's way back here, and then we're going to train this smaller growth to grow outward with wire. I'm going to cut this one back pretty far as well. If it lives, great. If it doesn't, that's okay as well. I always have a backup plan for what I'm doing. Now we've got this branch down here. It's kind of curving back forward. We've got this one here. I'm just going to go through this thing just like I would any other branch, and just kind of trim everything off that doesn't belong and cut back as far as I can to some inside growth, just like I would on any other tree. Keeping in mind that we're going to be wiring a lot of this stuff out as well. And I'm just going to go around the tree and do the same thing around the entire tree. And try to kind of bring everything back into perspective. I look kind of down on the tree, and I also look into the tree to see where all this stuff is, so I can make sure everything's where it belongs. Like for instance, this branch right here, it's kind of growing over a lower branch in the area, but it was weak and it wasn't doing real well, and I was able to get this branch here that popped out as a consequence. And I'm going to bring this branch, I'm actually cutting back to, and I'm going to do that now. I'm going to cut back to this smaller, weaker branch in here. But without letting this branch grow like I did, I would have never got this branch back budded into here to where I can cut back to and wire into position where I needed it to be. And again, this thing here, it's really gnarly and thick, And because I let this extension growth here grow, I'm going to zoom in so you can see this. Okay, so I've zoomed into this spot on the tree to show you this branch here. As you can see, I'd cut it back and it wasn't doing real well and it wasn't real viable. And it's kind of thick for the location it's in, but it was a sacrifice branch to begin with to heal this wound site right here. Now this wound site is almost completely healed over. So this part of it's kind of straight and kind of not interesting, but I don't really have a choice in the matter because I kind of want to keep it because of the location it's in. It's my back branch. I have this part of it right here that juts off to the side and fills in this area here. And I may eventually just cut it back to that and then train this part of the branch out this way to fill in. Matter of fact, now that I'm looking at it, I may just go ahead and do that now, because this branch here is to the size that I can get away with doing the wiring that I need to. But what I wanted to show you is mainly is this part of the branch was not doing real well, so I let a dormant bud here grow, and it of course grows upward, and I just didn't touch it this year. And it brought enough strength in this branch that I had another smaller bud here on the outside pop and filled in this area here. Now I'd like to keep it, but again, this part of the branch here is just straight. There's no movement in it whatsoever. It's got a little bit of a wire scar, and I do have another dormant bud way back here on this branch that's here as well. So I think the best thing for this branch this year is to go ahead and eliminate this part now that we have a little bit of a ramification situation going on here. And I've got this small bud here that I can eventually train out to fill out this area over here if necessary. This part of the branch here is also growing over the top of a lower part of the bottom branch that I don't want to shade. I want to leave it open so it can stay viable as well. Matter of fact, I'm going to cut this one back to there. So let's go ahead and, we're just going to go ahead and cut this all back. Now, when I do this, I do it in two stages, see, and I'll take the branch here, and then I'll kind of whittle it back in one or two more cuts to where I actually want it to be taken off. That way it's a more controlled cut. Okay, and hopefully if I move this around, you may or may not be able to see it. It might be out of the camera shot. Right here was where we moved that branch back to. Now we've got all this branch here, which you can't really see. You get back over this way. There we go. Now we've got this branch here that we're going to move over and into position with wire. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Always you have to plan ahead with your trimming. So to me that looks a lot better. It's not out as far as the lower branch is, and if you look at it from the front now, you've got this that can come here and this that goes back to the back. So we're going to continue around the tree with that same mindset and do the same thing. Now, looking at this side of the tree here, this branch right here, we have a similar situation. We've got, I'm sorry, wrong branch. Down further. This one. I have this branch here that I have from inside here all the way out to about here. I've got this giant area here with no branching whatsoever. Okay? And not the best thing for this branch, but it's what I have to work with. And then out here is where most of my ramification is. I let this for 2 years grow unchecked and just kind of cut it back at the end of fall each year. And I got this back branch here to pop. And there's actually a front branch on this side here that came out as well, that I would like to eventually remove this part of the branch back to. And I think that would be a really smart move to do. However, right now I don't have the ability to do that unless I come over here and eliminate some of the thickness on this branch so I can keep everything in balance. And it's something I'm contemplating now because of what I want to try to do is create that taper that I'm looking for, and I'm looking above that branch at the branches above it to see if it's possible to do that, and I think we might be able to go ahead and do that this season. To you know, the more compact we can make this tree, the better it's going to look. The thicker the trunk's going to look. So I think I'm going to get pretty drastic on this tree this year. I mean, I've been thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it, growing season to growing season, and now I think is the time to go ahead and do what needs to be done so we can start working really on developing our ramification. So let me go ahead and zoom out real quick so you can see that what the overall design of the tree looks like now. Okay. And watch the transformation that's going to take place just by making 2 cuts on 2 branches. And the look that the trunk appears after this is done. Okay, so right now this and this show the canopy. And it shows a fairly large canopy. However, it's not a real compact canopy. So I'm going to cut back to this branch here. Okay, because I've already got more ramification and it's a lot smaller than what's under here. So what we do is we come in here, again, make our first cut, and then sneak up to there. Okay, now I can take these 2 and wire them out like this, and I've got almost, not quite the same extension growth, but I think this is actually right for where we need to be. And of course, anytime you've got an old branch stub or whatever, go ahead and remove those while you're at it. Okay, so now that's brought this whole side in. This is going to have to be cut back as well. So while we're looking at this side, and so you can see the transformation, I'm going to do that now as well. This wasn't a real strong branch, but again, I let some extension growth happen, and the more energy you allow into these branches, the healthier and stronger they're going to be. And I even got a back bud clear to here that I could go back to, but I think what I'm going to do is actually go clear to here. Okay, and utilize this branch and this branch on here as the new 2 keepers. So let me go ahead and go back to here. Bam, utilizing these 2 now as the branches for ramification on this one. Now that we've brought this side in, this side over here is way out of balance. And that's what I was talking about with this long straight section here not being real good or viable for the tree. So now I'm going to come over here to this side, and I'm going to get pretty drastic, and I'm going to cut there's a bud right here that will pop this year. So I'm going to go to here with this branch for now, with the thoughts that there's a dormant bud right here that's going to pop that'll come out this way and fill into about right here. Now I've got this branch, as well as this dormant bud right here that'll come out to fill in this area. Okay, so now the tighter we've brought the canopy in, the more compact and more ramification we can get in the overall canopy design. Now because I did that there, if we look up above here, we got the same situation. We've got a real thick branch here with nothing in here per se, but we've got this nice ramified up here branch that's on the same trunk line. We've got this here that's got really not a whole lot, but at least it has some movement and some interest. It goes back, up, down, and forward into this nasty, gnarly stub right here. But by letting it have this extension growth, I got a bud pop back here a couple years ago, and it's nice and ramified, and that's what I was going to cut back to once it was established, and it is. So now what we do, again, we cut. Sorry, dude, you're going to have to go too. Back to it. Now this is our branch extension here. And it maintains that nice movement. It comes down and back and forth and up again. And it's more interesting than that big nasty gnarly stub that we had there. So when you get to this stage of development on a tree like this, these are the things you want to start thinking about and looking at. Alright, so now let's zoom back out again and see with just those few minor cuts on these branches how much closer the canopy is, number one. And it looks kind of spindly for now, but in my opinion, when we get this thing wired, because everything's kind of back in the back right now, I got to wire everything and bring it all kind of forward, and we're going to do that today as well. But that's going to make this trunk look a lot thicker once we get everything wired in position. So we're going to keep on doing that all the way up this tree, and then we're going to look at wiring after that. And we've got a lot of stuff right here that we need to look at and remove the majority of as well. It's all stuff that pops up every year, and I just kind of let it grow because this is a large wound site right here that still needs quite a bit of healing. But we don't want it to take over, because if it takes over, we're going to get a reverse taper back here that we don't want. So every year I've got to come in here and cut it all back out, and then every year, of course, we get more buds pop and more of that growth. I just got to keep it in check so it doesn't get out of hand. Now let's look at what we got over here. I think what we're going to do over here is take this back to this small branch here, because we got to keep everything in perspective. Oh, let me look here. Maybe I can take it to that one. No, I think that's going to be best for there, just to take it back to that one. Cut it off. Come back. This front one here, I think we're going to go to here. Good. This can go ahead and come off now. It's not needed. Got these two side by side. Right directly across from another one. They're not going to do us any good where they are. This. Okay. Come out to here. And take that back to there. Alright, now I'm just going to kind of go back on all these tertiary branches and trim them back. Let me go ahead and get it wired up and finalized. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at it and have a little talk about it, and then look at some pots to potentially put this tree into. So stay tuned. Okay, there you have it for this year. We've got everything cut back to where we want it. We've got everything wired into position where we want it. We've got everything layered so that nothing above is shading anything below. We've got the canopy set up so the farthest out is at the bottom and the closest is in at the top. And it goes gradually in, and it goes gradually in. And if you look at the way the canopy looks now, it's a little bit heavy on this side and a little bit lighter on this side, which is what we want, because we don't want anything mirror image. But we've got everything that we need wired into position, and we're going to go ahead and do a quick 360 here real quick, and then we're going to come back and talk about pot selection. I wanted you to see what it looks like after the wiring job's done on this tree. You can see the structure that we've got set, where everything is in position. This right here, I think we're going to move over just a smidge. About there. I like it there better. So we'll do that. Alright. Now, let me go ahead and pull some pots down. We're going to be looking at some rectangular pots, we're going to look at some oval pots, and come up with some kind of idea of what we want as far as a planting angle number one, which is pretty close to where it is now, and then a pot that we can put it in from this growing tub into a mica bonsai pot. Stay tuned.